Glucose is the most prominent energy molecule in biological systems. It is used as an energy source in organisms, all the way from bacteria to humans. It provides about 4 kilocalories of energy per gram. Glucose is virtually the sole fuel for the human brain, except during prolonged starvation. The brain lacks fuel stores and hence requires a continuous supply of glucose. In humans, the brain accounts for 2% of the body weight, but it consumes 20% of energy coming from glucose, which absolutely makes the brain the main consumer of glucose. It consumes about 120 gram daily, which corresponds to an energy input of about 480 kilocalorie, accounting for some 60% of utilization of glucose by the whole body in the resting state. Much of the energy, from 60 to 70%, is used to power transport mechanisms that maintain the sodium and potassium balance that is required for the transmission of the nerve impulses that are generated by the brain. The brain must also synthesize neurotransmitters and their receptors to propagate nerve impulses. And for this very reason, there are tight regulation of glucose metabolism in the brain, which are of course very critical for brain physiology, and consistent with its critical role for physiological functions. Disruption of normal glucose metabolism forms the physiological basis for many brain disorders. Normally, human bodies are sugar-driven machines. Ingested carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which is mainly transported and used as energy or stored as glycogen in liver, and of course in the muscle tissue as well. When deprived of carbohydrates, which is usually below 50 grams per day, the liver becomes the sole provider of glucose to feed our hungry organs, especially the brain, a particularly greedy entity accounting for 20% of total energy expenditure, as I mentioned before. So glucose and oxygen availability influences physiological processes. When glucose is low, physiological processes requiring mental effort, self-control and decision-making, and such activities are impaired. impaired. Confusion and coma even can occur at low levels of glucose. It takes the human brain 3 weeks to adapt to using alternative fuel sources, yet it has to use alternative molecules when necessary. Brain cannot directly use fat for energy. The backup is chemicals called ketone bodies that the liver derives primarily from fatty acid molecules. These ketones are released into the bloodstream, taken up by the brain and other organs, shuttled into the energy factory, mitochondria, and used up as fuel. Blood glucose remains physiologically normal due to glucose derived from certain amino acids and the breakdown of fatty acids, and that is how low sugar is avoided in the brain. During metabolic stress, ketones serve as an alternative energy source to maintain normal brain cell metabolism. In fact, some types of ketones may be an even more efficient fuel than glucose, providing more energy per unit of oxygen used. So ketone bodies can be much more effective than glucose, yet they are not the primarily preferred molecules by the human brain. Some glucose is converted to lactic acid by some uh, helper cells, which are called glial cells in the human brain. And these lactic acid molecules are then utilized as an energy source by brain cells. Some glucose is used by intestinal cells and red blood cells, while the rest reaches the liver, adipose tissue, and muscle cells. Other than its direct use as a monomer, glucose can be broken down to synthesize a wide variety of other molecules. This is important as glucose serves both as a primary store of energy and as a source of organic carbon. Glucose can be broken down and converted into lipids. It's also a precursor for the synthesis of other important molecules such as uh, vitamin C. Glucose is also the most widely used hexose, six carbon sugar in most living organisms. One possible explanation for this is that glucose has a lower tendency than other hexose sugars like fructose and galactose to react non-specifically with the amine groups of proteins. The reason for glucose having the most stable cyclic form of all the hexose sugars is that its hydroxyl groups are in the right position. And that gives a certain advantage to glucose molecule, and that's exactly the reason why it is superior to all the other members to hexose sugar family. Glucose is produced by plants through photosynthesis using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and can be used by all living organisms as an energy and carbon source. However, most glucose does not occur in its free form, but in the form of its polymers, lactose and sucrose and starch and others, which are energy reserve substances. And of course, we have chemicals like cellulose and chitin, which are found in structures, yet when digested and broken down, they can also provide a lot of glucose molecules since they are solely made up of glucose only. All animals are able to produce glucose themselves from certain precursors as the need arises. Nerve cells, cells of the renal medulla in the kidneys, and erythrocytes depend on glucose for their energy production. That's why approximately 180 to 200 grams of glucose are produced in the liver of an adult in 24 hours. Now, in order to get into or out of cell membranes of cells and membranes of cell organelles, glucose requires special transportation mechanisms. So glucose transporters are a wide group of membrane proteins that facilitate the transport of glucose across the plasma membrane, a process known as facilitated diffusion. There are 14 glucose transporters which are encoded by the human genome. So glucose transporter is a type of transport protein that basically helps glucose to get in and out of cells. There are two very famous types of glucose transporters, GLUT, which is glucose transporter number 1, and GLUT3, glucose transporter number 3. They are located in the plasma membrane of cells throughout the body, as they are responsible for maintaining a basal rate of glucose uptake in the body. In the small intestine, more precisely in the jejunum region of the small intestine, glucose is taken up into the intestinal epithelial cells with the help of these glucose transporters. And these glucose transporters, GLUT number ones especially, is produced by most cell types and is of particular importance for nerve cells and pancreatic beta cells. As you see, glucose is a fascinating molecule, all the way from its usage to the mechanisms that help cells to get it in and out of cells. It is truly a molecule with a significant biochemical importance for living organisms. Thanks for watching.